Part 4. Man at the Top of the Food Chain. Author, Xianglang Guo. Chapter 31. It has been almost a month since Shang Angguo died. At this time, more than 1,000 kilometers away from Zhongdu City, in the mountains and hills to the south, a small bus was driving hard on the mountain road. This bus was a private long-distance bus. People were so crowded in the small bus that there was no place to stand. Even so, every few miles, the greedy driver would stop the bus and solicit a few more customers to get on, causing the passengers on the bus to curse. The bus was filled with various smells, including stinky socks, stinky farts, sweat, food, etc. People staying on it were like staying in a refugee camp, and every second was a torture. And at the end of the bus, a tall and strong man sat in the corner, with a black blanket covering most of his face and body, making it difficult to see his appearance. He was Li Enping. After killing Shang Angguo in Zhongdu City, he broke through the encirclement of the army. Afterwards, no rumors of that incident were seen in any newspapers, news, or even on the internet. The change of the mayor of Zhongdu was widely reported. He understood that the government had blocked the news of the whole incident. However, he understood that the matter was not over yet. Although his power was already very strong, he still could not confront the power of the country head-on. He did not believe that the upper echelons of the government would let him off lightly in this incident. It is conceivable that a large amount of manpower and material resources have been used to capture him. He was not afraid of ordinary policemen, but the legendary Daxia dragon bird still made him feel scared. There were also military weapons. Last time, he was beaten half to death by a powerful sniper rifle. Once a more powerful weapon was deployed, he did not know if he could stop it. You know, the energy he used for self-healing was not unlimited. So his goal was to become stronger, so strong that it would affect the entire Daxia and bring justice to everyone. Reward the good and punish the evil. This is not just a casual talk. Li Enping has always believed so. After taking revenge, he now has more time to fulfill this dream. And the premise of fulfilling this dream is to become strong enough. If he wants to become stronger now, he must devour more souls, the souls of evil people. He began to think about where there are the most evil people. The first thing Li Enping thought of was the prison, but the supervision there was too strict. He was afraid that he would be discovered by the government after just eating a few people. Moreover, the evil people in the prison were all people who had been punished. He was targeting more people who were at large and could not be punished by law. He thought again and again, and found that he had lived for more than 20 years. Although he now had superpowers, he was not familiar with crimes, and most of what he knew was from movies and TV. So he left Zhongdu and went to the south. The reason for choosing the south was that he subconsciously thought that Tianjin, as the capital of Daxia, must be very powerful in the north. On the contrary, the power of the south of Daxia has always been inferior to that of the north, and it is relatively poor and poorer. And there will be more poor people and weak people here, and they need his help more. Before leaving, he sneaked into the Blue Sea Ark many times to find Wei Shishi's trace, but this woman seemed to have evaporated from the world, and he could not find her anywhere. Li Enping had no intelligence channel of his own, so he could only give up temporarily. Li Enping planned to come back to her for revenge after he became stronger and no longer feared the power of the government. So after Li Enping left Zhongdu City, he headed south and killed and ate all the bad guys he met on the way. By the way, he also interrogated some information about the underworld and corrupt officials. He really gained a lot. As he thought, the government's power in the south is much weaker than that in the north. There are many underworlds here, and there are even more corrupt officials, and all kinds of monsters can be seen. Li Enping has eaten the souls of more than 80 people in the past month. Unfortunately, his physical fitness is too strong now. He has eaten ordinary people all the way, and the improvement to him is minimal. Instead, he has saved more than 40 people's energy to regenerate. According to Hay, if he wants to improve now, if he only relies on eating ordinary people, he may need more than 1,000 people for his physical fitness to improve by more than 0.1. So Li Anping still saved most of the energy, but the energy was used up quickly because Li Anping used it to assist his cultivation. Knowing that it was difficult to increase strength by eating ordinary people, all kinds of desperate self-mutilation cultivation were performed on him one by one. Li Anping spent most of his time in the mountains and jungles, doing various strength, speed, flexibility, dodge, reaction training, and madly squeezing his physical potential. Since he had the ability, his body has been endowed with infinite evolution potential. Even if he does not rely on devouring humans, he can rely on continuous cultivation to become stronger. And with a body that is not afraid of injury or death, his physical progress is amazing, which is really a world of difference compared to ordinary people. Now his physical fitness is 3.2 in strength, 2.1 in speed, and 4.0 in physical fitness. The larger the value of physical fitness, the more difficult it is to improve by 0.1, and the effect of improvement is also geometrically increased. At the same time, he also practiced adaptability in the explosive state. The burst state consumes one person's soul and can temporarily increase his physical fitness to strength 4.0 and speed 3.0, and the maintenance time is 5 minutes. However, after practicing many times, he has extended the time to 8 minutes, and gradually got used to the temporary increase in strength and speed, which greatly improved his combat power. He also wanted to improve the effect of the burst state, but every time he wanted to burst more than one person's soul energy, the result was that the body could not bear it and collapsed faster. Fortunately, he could heal himself, otherwise he would have died long ago. While practicing, he also decided on the target to go to. That is the southern pearl called Emerald City. It is the southern border of Daxia. It belongs to Daxia, but not to Daxia. The government's control is seriously insufficient. The various forces in the city are divided. There are foreign hostile forces, cults, international groups, etc., and all kinds of smuggling, drug trafficking, and arms black businesses can be seen everywhere there. Hell, the land of sin, the paradise on earth, the land of lawlessness, no matter which name it is, it shows the chaos of Emerald City. But this is just right for Li Anping. There he has enough evil people to eat, and there is justice waiting for him to maintain. The government's management is weak, and there is simply no place more suitable for him than Emerald City. The long-distance bus he took this morning was destined for a small town near Emerald City. Although the environment inside the bus was terrible, it didn't matter to Li Anping, who was already used to the hellish training. Sitting next to Li Anping was a young woman, who was holding a baby. It was a boy who couldn't speak, and could only call Mom, Mom. He was very well behaved and didn't cry or make a fuss along the way. The woman was not good looking, but she was pretty. She seemed to have returned from working in the city and brought her son to visit her parents in the town. At first, the woman chatted with Li Anping for a few words, but when she saw Li Anping's cold look, she stopped talking. 2 hours later, the sun gradually sank, and the bus stopped at the door of a gas station. The passengers got off one by one and prepared to have dinner. The woman next to her also stood up holding the child. But seeing Li Anping still sitting there with his head covered, he could not help but remind him, "Brother, get off the bus and eat." Although the food here is a bit expensive, there are still more than 4 hours of mountain road ahead, and there is no place to eat on the road. "It's okay, I'm not hungry." Li Anping lifted the black cloth and revealed a resolute face. With his current physical fitness, it doesn't matter if he doesn't eat for 3 days and 3 nights. But once he eats, it's no problem to eat 10 or 8 tables. The woman smiled, her eyes squinted together, revealing 2 dimples, which are not good looking, but make people feel very kind. She smiled and said, "I'm not hungry now, but I will be hungry in a while." Otherwise, you wait in the car and I'll get you some food. No, I'm really not hungry. If the person in front of him was a bad guy, Li Anping could slap him to death without hesitation, but when facing a kind person, he couldn't do that. How can you not eat with such a strong body? The woman said. It's okay, you wait here, I'll get you some food after I finish eating. Li Anping looked at the figure of the woman getting off the car and suddenly laughed. What's so funny? If she knew how many people you killed, she would probably be too late to call the police, let alone give you food. Hey, you don't understand. This kind of human emotion is the most precious thing about human beings. Inside the gas station, in addition to the bus that Li Anping was sitting on, there were 2 other buses parked. Passengers were crowded in a small restaurant for dinner. It was very lively and everyone lined up to get food. This was exactly the atmosphere that Li Anping liked the most in the past month. Although no one was known to him, as long as he saw this kind of liveliness, he could feel that he was still a person, not a monster away from the crowd. More than 10 minutes later, another van drove to the gas station. 2 burly men and a fat middle-aged woman got off the car. As soon as the 3 got off the car, they bumped into a short man who came out of the gas station. The 4 said a few words, and the short man pointed at the woman holding the child. The 4 ran over aggressively and surrounded the woman. The middle-aged fat woman was the first to curse angrily, "You little bitch, you just had a few words with me, how could you run away with your grandson? It's too outrageous." The woman had just finished her meal and was walking out of the restaurant when she was suddenly surrounded by 4 people. She subconsciously hugged her child and retreated behind her. "Who are you? I don't know you." She took a few steps back and bumped into another man. The man shouted, "Sister-in-law, you are really something. You had a few words with my mother, how could you secretly run away with the dog baby? Do you know how worried we are?" After saying that, he reached out to grab the child in the woman's arms. The man's ferocity made the little boy cry loudly. The woman shouted that she didn't know you, but was drowned out by the voices of the other people. They pushed and shoved towards the van outside. The middle-aged woman yelled at the top of her voice, "You little bitch, I told you a few words and you ran away. I've called your parents and they know about it now. You can explain it to them later." The other short man grabbed the woman's shoulders with both hands and yelled, "Wife, if you and mom have any objections, don't take your son out. It's dangerous for a woman like you to run around outside. Come back with me quickly." The woman's cries were suppressed. She just hugged the child tightly, but her body was unstoppably carried into the van by 4 people. Things happened so fast that only a few people in the crowd seemed to stand up and wanted to do something, but they found that the van had already driven away. Man at the top of the food chain. Author, SpecialAbilities. Chapter 32. When something like this happened during a long trip, it immediately aroused a lot of discussion among the onlookers in the restaurant. Someone who heard the conversation clearly just now said, "My daughter-in-law had a fight with her mother-in-law and ran away from home with her child in her arms. Then my mother-in-law and husband chased her and took her back." Several aunts and aunts immediately started gossiping, "Tisk tisk, girls nowadays are so miserable. They take their children and run away from home for the slightest trivial matter. It's so shameful. Well, how dare we do that at that time? Let alone running away from home, we wouldn't even dare to talk to my mother-in-law." Some people also doubted, "I think that girl is quite smart. Could it be that she was sold into the mountains and escaped? She seemed to have gone out crying just now. Could she really be a human trafficker? Is it true or not, are human traffickers so bold now? Just kidnap people in broad daylight. I see that the girl didn't resist much. It's probably because the mother-in-law and daughter-in-law are having a conflict. Perhaps, there are many swindlers who abduct and traffic women now. They pretend to be acquaintances and abduct people in front of others." However, no matter how much they talked about it, it was useless at this moment. The van had already left, and the matter of the woman being taken away was destined to become nothing more than a topic of conversation after dinner. After a while, the bus driver shouted to get on the bus. After dinner, the passengers came out of the hotel and got on the bus. No one cared any more about the whereabouts of the girl and the baby. No one noticed that at some point, a man was missing from the last row of the bus. Li Anping followed the van from a distance and did not immediately step forward to rescue the person. He knew that such human traffickers usually had accomplices. In particular, they usually focus on where the people they trafficked are kept, as well as their uplines, human trafficking, organ procurement and other criminal gangs. He plans to uproot them. So he followed the van quietly. With his current speed and physical strength, it would be effortless to follow a van, not to mention that he was on a mountain road and the van did not dare to drive too fast. Li Anping followed more easily. While following, he also listened carefully to the movements in the van to prevent any accidents. In the van, away from the gas station, the expressions of the three men and one woman suddenly changed. A strong man was driving, and a fat middle-aged woman was sitting in the passenger seat. A strong man and a short boy were left in the second row of the van, and they surrounded the woman from the left to the right. The middle-aged woman took out a pack of cigarettes from her bag and smoked one. Listening to the crying voice of the woman behind her, she cursed, "Why are you crying? I tell you, don't even think about escaping once we get into our hands. Be obedient and I will find a good seller for you, otherwise I will sell you to a prostitute village in southern Xinjiang and let people make you pregnant every day." The woman just cried harder when she heard this. The short man on the side looked at him with a lustful look and comforted, "Little sister, be obedient, and my brother will take care of you. Then I will find a rich man to buy it for you, guaranteeing you a lifetime of food and clothing." Seeing the woman crying like pear blossoms in the rain, the man's eyes became hot and he couldn't help but reach out his hand to the woman's back and touch her gently. The woman screamed and retreated to the other side, but bumped into the arm of another strong man. She couldn't escape the touch of the short man, so she could only cry and yell, "Please, please, don't want. Hey, what are you afraid of? I'm here to comfort you." The man licked his lips and said, "Put the child down first, don't break it." No. Upon hearing this, the woman hugged the child in her arms tighter, bit her lip and said, "Please, please, at least let the child go." "Okay, you put the child down first and let me check you to make sure there's nothing wrong with it, otherwise we won't be able to sell it." The short man winked at the strong man, and the strong man reached out to grab the child. The woman struggled fiercely, but her strength was not as strong as that of the strong man. She was slapped several times by the short man beside her, and the child was taken away. The child was taken away, and the woman became even more excited. She cried, yelled, and fussed, scratching with her hands and leaving a bloody mark on the short man's face. "Damn it!" The short man slapped the woman again, then grabbed her hair and dragged her toward the last row of seats in the van. He shouted to the fat middle-aged woman in the passenger seat, "Damn, I can't help it anymore. Anyway, she is a woman who has given birth to a child. Let me do it first." The fat woman frowned and said, "Don't kill people while they're still waiting to be sold. Don't worry, I've developed it and I'm guaranteed to sell it for more money." The man's eyes lit up, he pushed the girl onto the back seat and immediately started to pull up the girl's clothes. "I want to put my hands in and grope the girl's body." The girl cried and shouted, trying to push the short man away with her hands, but he sat on her and couldn't avoid the other's hands. The child was held in the arms of the strong man and was already crying non-stop. His heart-rending shouts sounded so desolate. "Please, don't do it in front of the children." The woman's face was full of tears, and she begged for mercy in a hoarse voice. The short man had no scruples. He pressed the woman's hands with one hand and quickly unbuttoned the woman's coat with the other hand. "Haha, this is called sex education. Let this kid open his eyes and know that his mother is a slut. Damn it, You're going to kill me. Boom. Before he could finish his words, a hand had already pierced through the roof of the car and hit his head directly. Immediately, red and white burst into a piece, sticking to the bodies of everyone in the car. The woman was so scared that she fainted with brains all over her face. Ah! What is that? There is someone on the roof of the car. The remaining 3 traffickers reacted differently, but before they could make any moves, the hand had already reached back, and then another hand reached in from the window, grabbed the middle-aged fat woman's head, pulled her out of the car window, and threw her out of the mountain road. The fat woman drew an arc in the air and fell towards the cliff in the distance. A long scream sounded in the air, and as the arc slid down, it stopped abruptly, and finally turned into a pool of flesh and blood on the mountain wall. The remaining 2 strong men were already horrified. In their desperate eyes, Li Anping tore a big hole in the roof of the van, then jumped into the roof, put one hand on the driver's shoulder, and said coldly, "Stop." The driver stopped the van trembling, looking at Li Anping with fear in his eyes. After the car stopped, Li Anping ignored him. He just grabbed the strong man holding the child with one hand, tore his neck to pieces, and then took the child back to his arms. Putting the child in the co-pilot seat, he said to the driver, "I will kill you if you dare to drive away." At this moment, Li Anping was a demon and a monster in the driver's eyes. How dare he disagree? He nodded and agreed hurriedly, fearing that Li Anping would tear him apart. So Li Anping carried the bodies of the 2 people in the car and threw them into the forest. Then he picked up the child and sat in the co-pilot seat, saying to the driver, "Drive to the nearest town." The driver started the van in a panic, his face pale, not knowing what fate awaited him. He laughed, he, you are getting more and more skilled. You ate the soul while killing people. You can eat their souls directly without being so violent. They deserve to die. It's too easy for them to die brain dead directly. Li Anping feels that he is killing people more and more skillfully recently, and the speed of absorbing souls is getting faster and faster. He doesn't even need to do anything special. When he kills the other party, his soul has been absorbed by him. It is much more convenient than putting his hands on others for a while at the beginning. Although your body can become infinitely stronger now, the improvement of your ability itself is very slow. Hey guest, I have never seen a human with my ability before, but according to my experience, if your ability continues to evolve, you may not need to make contact in the future, and you can absorb the souls of mortals through the air. The efficiency of absorption will also be stronger. Absorb through the air? Li Anping didn't expect that he could do this. If he could absorb souls through the air, he would undoubtedly be invincible when fighting ordinary people without abilities, and many things would be much more feasible. But everything depends on the range of this distance. Half an hour later, at the entrance of a highway in a small town, the woman in the van woke up and saw that she was red and white, and she screamed again. But when she found the child in front of her, she screamed in surprise and joy, and hugged the child tightly, as if she was afraid of losing the child again. Li Anping, who was outside the car, saw that the woman was fine, so he turned and walked out of the town. The driver followed behind him, his steps were weak. The back of his clothes had long been wet with cold sweat. He wanted to run away, but looking at the figure of Li Anping walking in front of him, he couldn't muster up the courage. "I'll ask the questions and you answer them." Okay, the man replied tremblingly, and his teeth trembled without saying a word. Li Anping saw him like this and said kindly, "Don't worry, answer my questions well. You are just a driver, and your crime is not punishable by death. As long as you answer the questions honestly, I won't kill you." He laughed again, "You are so hypocritical. You obviously planned to kill him, but you still deceived him like this. Is this your justice? This is the necessary process to eliminate evil." Li Anping said calmly, "You've thought it through, so I'll start asking." As they walked, Li Enping felt the other party's heartbeat slowly slow down, and began to ask about the other party's situation. He learned that the other party was a small gang of 4 people. Their superiors were an organization called Lone Wolf, and Lone Wolf lived in Emerald City. All the traffickers nearby went to Lone Wolf to sell the stolen goods after abducting people. It is said that this Lone Wolf is very cunning. For many years, no one even knows what their leader looks like. There are even different opinions about whether he is a man or a woman, old or young. Many people have tried to assassinate their leader, but he easily escaped. They even failed to find his people, and then tracked him down and killed him. A few years ago, several passionate detectives wanted to completely eliminate this criminal cancer, but in less than 2 days, they all disappeared. This lone wolf either has a deep background or someone with ability is playing tricks. Li Enping guessed in his heart after listening to the news about the lone wolf. After the driver on the side finished telling all the information he knew, he looked at Li Enping's face carefully, worried about his life. Li Enping asked them where they sold the stolen goods, and then asked, "Do you know what the lone wolf did with so many women and children after buying them?" "They forced those women to have sex, and some were sold abroad." The driver shook his head blankly, but when he saw Li Enping frowning, he immediately said in a panic, "Also, there is a rumor that Lone Wolf is a member of the Shadow Cult, and he bought people to sacrifice to the Black God." You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Man at the top of the food chain. Author, Xiong Lango. Chapter 33. Nonsense. What religion would need so many people to offer sacrifices? Li Enping looked at the driver's panicked face, shook his head and said, "What kind of religion is that shadow cult? I've never heard of it." "I don't know either, really. The shadow cult is a sect in the ancient legend of Emerald City. Legend has it that before Daxia, they were the masters of Emerald City. What they like most is to kill living people and offer them as sacrifices to please their gods. But more than 100 years ago, after Daxia's army reached southern Xinjiang, it ruled the entire Emerald City, and the shadow cult was also wiped out as a cult. Except for the legends left behind, there is no record of the shadow cult. The older locals all know about this matter." After listening to this, Li Enping became more confused. He didn't expect that this human trafficking would involve an ancient cult. It seems that things are more complicated than he imagined. At that moment, he asked the driver a few more questions, and when he found that the other party didn't know more, he gently touched the other party's arm, ate the driver's soul, and then threw the body casually on a nearby mountain road. Then he ran towards Emerald City. He wanted to kill the lone wolf and wipe out all the criminal organizations that trafficked in human beings. 3 hours later, the long-distance bus station in Emerald City. Li Enping walked out of an alley, and 2 gangsters behind him fell to the ground, groaning constantly. And Li Enping's face was full of haze. This was the 3rd group of thieves he had seen since getting off the long-distance bus station. He had imagined how many criminals there were in Emerald City and how high the crime rate was. When he really arrived at this place, he realized that he had thought too simply. Looking up, the gray haze covered the entire sky. Not to mention a trace of starlight, even the moon could not be seen in the entire sky. This was caused by the large-scale unrestrained factory discharge in the city. Various gray and black gases came out of the chimneys and were discharged into the sky wantonly. In this kind of place, no one manages pollution at all. The station was full of ragged citizens with gloomy expressions. There was no innocence or childishness on the faces of the few children. Because they were not playing on the street, but were begging for money and property around the passengers who got off the bus. After being scolded, they did not get angry, but just changed another passenger and continued begging. The numbness and accident on their faces made Li Enping feel chilled. There were many pedestrians on the road, but they all walked on their own. They were in a hurry, with indifferent expressions, and never asked about the things around them. Li Anping asked for directions several times, but was ignored by the other party. On the street, the shops on both sides of the street were colorful and there was an endless stream of people, but most of the shops around the station had one or two women standing at the door in revealing clothes. When they saw the well-dressed Li Anping, they cheered loudly and flirted with Li Anping. "Handsome guy. Come in and play. Handsome guy, come in and your sister loves you." What's more, in front of everyone, they took off their shirts, revealing a pair of plump little white rabbits that jumped out, attracting the attention of citizens on the street. Li Anping glanced at them and left quickly. This place was more chaotic than he had imagined. Facing such self-degrading people, he didn't know what to do. In this atmosphere, He seemed to be particularly happy. He asked, "Hey, why don't you teach them a lesson? Are you tempted?" "They are just forced by life." Li Anping said carefully, "It's not a big crime. Whatever you want. But this is really a good place. I feel that the air is full of the smell of crime. And it is also very prosperous, not inferior to Zhongdu at all. It really makes me tremble with excitement." Li Anping nodded and did not deny it. What he said was indeed right. Although the environment is very bad, the citizens seem more indifferent, and the crime rate is also shockingly high. But Emerald City is indeed very prosperous. Looking up, you can see towering buildings in the east, south, west and north, and the elevated roads are built as densely as spider webs. Especially now it is night, if you look from a high place, the whole Emerald City is a sea of lights. It was just like daylight. This situation reached its extreme in the city center. From underground to above ground, there were all kinds of shops for food, clothing, housing, and transportation, even including pornography, gambling, and drugs. From beautiful virgins to extinct animals, and even weapons eliminated from the army, they can all be bought here. It is simply a paradise for criminals. Li Anping took a taxi on the street and rushed to the place where the traffickers gave him to sell the stolen goods. The scene of the Emerald City where sin and prosperity danced together made him feel indescribably irritated. But the information around him kept pouring in. 50 meters away, a heavily made-up prostitute was having sex with 3 men in the alley, and their panting sounds seemed to be right next to Li Anping's ears. 100 meters away, a man robbed a woman's bag and ran away, but he was shot dead by the woman who took out a gun after walking a few steps. The woman picked up the bag, kicked the man's body a few times, cursed a few words and left. The people around seemed to be used to it, and there was not even one person who called the police. In a casino that they passed by, a man in a suit jumped out of the window and died on the spot. Several big men rushed out from the door and dragged the man's body back. They discussed who to sell his organs to pay off his debts. Emerald City, everything here hides a unique rule under the appearance of sin. Everyone acts according to the rules, even if these rules seem absurd and unruly to outsiders. Li Anping's eyes looked out the window, and his ears listened to the sound. For the first time, he felt that he could not curb the sin by his own strength. Because there were too many, Emerald City was full of crime and sin. Could he really manage it alone? Li Anping gradually began to think. He thought about how to change the situation in Emerald City. For the first time, the idea of how to change the world was presented to him. Although he said he wanted to uphold justice before, his idea was very simple, that is, to kill bad guys and help good people. But when he came to Emerald City, when crime and death lined up in front of him, he realized that it was not simply killing bad guys to change the world and uphold justice. He needed some more complex and more effective means. Half an hour later, the car stopped, interrupting Li Anping's thinking. He got off the car, and the taxi drove away impatiently, as if it was very dangerous here. Looking around, Li Anping found that the destination was a somewhat remote area. There were dilapidated buildings and abandoned factories all around. The walls were covered with various graffiti with unknown meanings. There were also some homeless people gathered in twos and threes in the distance. Cold eyes looked at Li Anping, who got off the car from time to time. There were several old residential buildings a few hundred meters away, and there were several grocery stores and convenience stores downstairs, but the business was deserted and there were few customers. Li Anping glanced at it and walked towards the destination, which was an abandoned building with rusty gates locked by a large iron lock. Li Anping frowned, which was different from the information he had received from the driver in advance. He didn't hear any voices from anyone in the building. Although this place is not as lively as the city center, it shouldn't be so desolate. As one of the bases for lone wolves to accept trafficked women and children, there shouldn't be no one. He touched the iron lock on the door, looked around, and then with a little force, he pulled the iron lock open. Pushing the door open, Li Anping walked in. This abandoned building has 5 floors in total. It was originally built as a nursing home. So the first floor is a series of offices, and the second to fourth floors are various dormitory-like rooms. Li Anping did not notice the presence of people, so he could only scan the rooms one by one. He opened the office on the first floor and drank half of the coffee on the table. He flipped through the drawers and filing cabinets and found that there was nothing left. He could only find some erotic magazines and tool books. At the back of the office, a rectangular object was covered with a black cloth. In the dark, if you don't pay attention, you will almost miss it. Li Anping smelled a pungent smell coming from his nose, and a bad premonition flashed through his mind. He stretched out his hand to pull the black cloth open, and looked at the scene in front of him, his eyes narrowed into a slit. It was a simple prison cell built with an iron cage. It was no more than 1 meter high and about 2 meters wide. People could only lie down or lie prone inside. There was also a small basin on the ground, which looked like some rotten leftovers. There were still some bright red blood stains around the iron cage. The stench of feces and urine emanated from the cage. An emaciated child's body was lying in the cage, with large groups of ants crawling on his body, revealing his white bones. It was hard to imagine what kind of torture and destruction he had suffered before his death. Li Anping covered the black cloth again, his face was ashen, and his fists were clenched white. But he didn't say the last word, just exhaled deeply, and then checked other corners of the office. But Li Anping's actions yielded nothing. From the messy office, it seemed that the people here had evacuated in a hurry, but took away all the information, leaving nothing useful. So Li Anping went upstairs and planned to check all the dormitories. The corridor was dark. Li Anping tried to turn on the light switch and found no response. However, with his current eyesight, he could see everything even in the dark corridor. He opened the dormitories on the second floor one by one, and the environment inside was as bad as he expected. The traffickers did not take care of the people they abducted as human beings. Excrement everywhere had turned into dark blood. There was nothing in the dormitory except a bed. All the windows were nailed shut with wooden boards, so you could not see outside and the sun could not shine in. According to the traffickers' driver, the people sent here could only eat 1 meal a day, and those who resisted fiercely would be fed sleeping pills. Everyone was in a state of weakness and could only lie in bed. There was no shower or toilet, and the people guarding them would often clean the dormitory hastily every few months. They only had the opportunity to take a shower when they were taken out to meet the cellar. Such a dormitory could leave even fewer clues. The only thing Li Anping gained was that he discovered that several people had carved their names and origins on the wall and the edge of the bed with their fingernails or blood. Man at the top of the food chain. Author, Xiang Go. Chapter 34. Li Jing, a college student from Tianjin. Wang Lina, 24 years old, came to Feiqiu City from her hometown Quancheng to work. Bai Tingting, came to southern Xinjiang with her boyfriend to travel. One name after another, and some origins were written down by their owners, either with despair or with hope. Li Anping could feel their helplessness from those bloody words. He didn't speak. He could feel that since Li Anping entered the building, a violent emotion had been spreading in his heart. It could explode at any time. Hey, do you have a way to read their memories when absorbing souls? Yes, you can, He replied, but your current ability level is too low. If you want to be able to read memories, you have to upgrade your ability. In short, you have to eat more people. Don't worry, I have a lot of people to eat this time. Li Anping clenched his fists tightly, and a cold light flashed in his eyes. He had never wanted to kill people as much as he did at this moment. Next, Li Anping searched all the remaining rooms. But apart from seeing more names, he still got nothing, but the anger in his heart was getting hotter and hotter. Finally, he walked to the last room on the 5th floor. The carefully decorated door seemed to indicate the difference of this room. Li Anping pushed open the door and found that this dormitory was twice the size of those downstairs, with a separate bathroom, TV, and a dining table. In particular, this room also had a window, and he could see the streets and buildings outside. Although it was still simple, it was luxurious compared to the cages below. Li Anping walked around the room and suddenly looked at the big bed in the middle of the house. There was a layer of gauze on the bed, and a vague human figure could be seen hiding underneath. Li Anping squinted his eyes and walked towards the big bed, and casually lifted the gauze. He didn't hear any heartbeat or breathing. Before pulling the gauze, he was sure that there was another body on the bed. As he expected, under the lifted gauze, a female corpse was lying on the bed. But she was much better preserved than the one downstairs. Her skin still looked tender and white, and her slender thighs and arms showed that she had been malnourished for a long time. Li Anping turned the female corpse over and found that there were large black spots on her chest, kiss marks on her breasts were clearly visible, and white liquid was flowing out of her lower body. It was obvious that she was violated before death. Li Anping lifted the woman's waterfall-like blonde hair and revealed a beautiful face. The three-dimensional cheeks with the characteristics of the Western continent were mixed with the unique roundness of the Daxia people. She seemed to be a mixed-race beauty. Obviously, this was a mixed-race beauty who was identified as a high-quality product by the human traffickers. But for some reason, the Lone Wolf's men suddenly evacuated and raped and killed the woman before leaving. Why did they evacuate suddenly? They raped and killed you before leaving. Li Anping looked at the female corpse on the bed and muttered to himself. He asked, not necessarily. Is it possible that someone came to attack here and raped and killed the woman? But there are no signs of resistance. There are also remnants of gunpowder weapons, Li Anping said as he carefully searched the woman's body in the hope of finding some clues. But still nothing was found. After all, he was not a professional, he could not dissect corpses, he did not have professional instruments, and he did not have his own intelligence network, and he had almost no reasoning and investigation ability. It was expected that he could not get any useful clues. Li Anping took a last look at the female corpse, reached out to close her eyes, and said coldly, "Don't worry, I will let all the murderers be buried with you." After saying this, Li Anping did not stay any longer, but jumped directly from the 5th floor window. With a bang, the whole person shook slightly, and he had landed on his feet. His solid legs did not even feel a little sore. He looked at the fire in the distance, where several homeless people were looking in his direction. However, the sky was gray, and Li Anping was falling very fast, so he didn't think the homeless people could see anything. But he still walked towards the homeless people. He wanted to ask some information from these homeless people. But unfortunately, after paying a few $100s and knocking out a homeless person who wanted to rob him, Li Anping didn't get the information he wanted. These homeless people only knew that the people in the building began to evacuate last night, and several container trucks drove over and emptied all the things in the building. As for why those people moved and where they moved to, These homeless people knew nothing. Li Anping asked carefully and found that they knew nothing about human trafficking, imprisonment, and abuse in the building. Obviously, the men of the Lone Wolf usually do a good job of keeping secrets here. Sighing, Li Anping looked at the convenience store and grocery store in the distance. As the small store closest to the building, it may be often visited by the men of the Lone Wolf, and maybe some information can be found. Thinking of this, Li Anping started to walk towards the convenience store. After passing through the door of the convenience store, a ding-dong sound rang out. Li Anping looked at the cash register. A middle-aged man with black-framed glasses and a sturdy physique put down the newspaper and nodded at him. "What do you want to buy? I'll tell you where it is." "No, I'll just take a look," Li Anping answered casually and started to walk around the supermarket. While he was walking around, he tried to get close to the boss, but the middle-aged man obviously didn't have much to talk about, and Li Anping was not a master of rhetoric, so the two chatted in a lukewarm manner. "Boss, do you know what the floors around here are for? It seems that no one is coming in or out." The middle-aged man put down the newspaper again, looked at Li Anping warily, and then said, "Why are you asking these questions?" "Nothing, I'm just asking casually." Li Anping pretended to be indifferent and replied, "I just moved here and saw several abandoned buildings nearby that no one was using. I felt curious." The middle-aged man snorted coldly and said, "If you want to survive in Emerald City, the first thing to remember is to stay out of other people's business." Li Anping shrugged and chatted with the man again, but no matter how he tried to insinuate himself, he couldn't get anything out of the boss's mouth. But judging from the man's previous behavior, he obviously knew something about the Lone Wolf space. The two chatted for a few more words, and just as Li Anping was considering whether to use violence, there was a clanging sound at the door. Li Anping looked over and found that three gangsters walked in. The three people started to search wildly as soon as they came in, especially some snacks and fruits, which they ate directly without paying. The shelves were also turned upside down. Finally, two of them filled their backpacks, and the other one, who had dyed blonde hair, walked in front of them, holding a can of milk in his hand, put it on the cash register, and shouted to the boss, "Check out." At this time, the convenience store owner put down the newspaper, as if he knew nothing about the previous behavior of the three gangsters. He smiled at the yellow-haired man, picked up the milk, and said with a forced smile, "A total of $2.03, thank you for your patronage." "No need to change." The yellow-haired man threw $5 on the cashier counter. Just as he was about to leave, he turned his head and said, "By the way, why is the fruit-flavored milk gone? That tastes better. You should buy some more." "Okay, okay, okay." The boss nodded hurriedly and said, "I'll go buy some tomorrow." "Fruit-flavored ones, right? I'll remember it." The yellow-haired man nodded with satisfaction, and walked towards the door with his two younger brothers, only to find that the tall Li Anping blocked the door. "I'm too lazy to say more to people like you." Li Anping glanced at the three people and said, "Put the things back, I can let you leave. Otherwise, I will break your arms." "Boy, do you know who we are? Bastard, beat him up." Li Anping was too lazy to listen to their nonsense, and went up directly, punched and kicked each of them, and knocked the three gangsters to the ground, groaning constantly. The three of them didn't even have time to react before they felt a sharp pain. They were shocked and afraid of Li Anping. The convenience store owner seemed stunned as well, looking at Li Anping and not knowing what to say. "Get out of here!" Li Anping pretended to kick the three hooligans on the ground, and the three hooligans immediately dodged like rolling gourds and crawled out the door. "Leave the things behind," Li Anping said again, and the three of them didn't even care about their bags, threw them on the ground and ran away. Not a single harsh word was said. It seems that occasionally meddling in other people's business is not so bad. Li Anping smiled at the boss. The boss was speechless. He walked to the door and took out the goods in the two backpacks one by one and put them back on the shelf. he said while sorting them out. I'm not as good as you, and I'm afraid of revenge from others. So I'll tell you what I can say. I'll tell you everything I can. If you ask me what I can't say, I won't tell you. Li Anping nodded to show that he understood. The boss looked at him deeply, locked the door, and walked towards the counter. Man at the top of the food chain. Author, Xianglang. Chapter 35. I can't tell you anything about the people in the building you asked about. But during this period, I have seen several groups of people come to them. If you want to know more, just check this address. Li Anping only got a note with the address from the convenience store owner. Although he still didn't know where the lone wolf's people went, at least he knew how to check. People from multiple forces came here? What did they have to do with the evacuation of the lone wolf? Li Anping was confused. He still didn't understand the distribution of forces in Emerald City. So he could only pick up the note given by the boss, took a taxi and left. 20 minutes later, a bar appeared in front of him. Flashpoint Bar, another bar. Li Anping couldn't help but think of the Volcano Bar in Zhongdu City. But this Flashpoint Bar is much smaller than the Volcano Bar. The store door is only the size of a convenience store, and there is a passage leading to the underground floor. The whole bar is very quiet from the outside, and it seems that there are not many customers. Li Anping walked down the passage and came to the underground floor. He opened the door and found that the whole bar was much larger and more upscale than he had imagined. There were not as many people in the bar as in other bars, but there were still quite a few. Most of them sat together in groups of 3 or 4 and talked about something. He walked to the bar, ordered a glass of wine casually and sat down. Then Li Anping pricked up his ears and heard a few words. Have you heard that the Kailan group and Zhongai Hall are fighting again? Tisk tisk, that Fang Qi challenged the 4 kings of Zhongai Hall alone and beat them so hard that they dared not even leave the door. This time, Zhongai Hall has lost face. Alas, this Fang Qi is a southern barbarian after all, not from Ardaxia. Although I admire his great skills, I still hope that someone from Daxia will beat him. I think it's coming soon. If the 4 kings of Zhongai Hall all lose, can the others in Zhongai Hall still bear it? And the people of Violet are not vegetarians either. This bar is obviously different from ordinary bars. There is no dance floor and no lonely men and women. Some people came to drink, but more people came to drink beverages. Men, women, young and old, almost everyone was there. There were all kinds of people, and the things they talked about were also all kinds of things. But no one thought that there was a Li Anping here who would listen to everything they talked about. Or did they not care whether they were heard? However, most people were currently talking about the 3 organizations of Zhongyatang, Violet, and Kailan Group. Li Anping listened and found that these 3 organizations seemed to be the first-class forces in Emerald City. Now they are fighting almost every day, and all kinds of rumors are flying all over the sky. He began to doubt whether the actions of the lone wolf were related to the fighting between these 3 forces. At this moment, a glass of wine was pushed in front of Li Anping. Hello, I'll buy you a drink. Li Anping turned his head and looked at the person who was talking. He was a short guy with a sly look. A pair of small eyes were shining, and he kept looking at Li Anping. I don't know you. Li Anping looked at the man and said. The man laughed, my name is Dong Man. Is this your first time here? I've never seen you before. Li Anping frowned, not knowing where he had revealed himself. Seeming to know what Li Anping was thinking, Dong Man smiled and said straight to the point, haha, actually I'm a frequent visitor to this bar, and I've seen almost all the guests here. But since you've come here, you must want to get some information, right? Li Anping thought for a moment and replied, I want to find someone. Dong Man became interested and asked, who are you looking for? Tell me, maybe I can help you. I'm well informed in Emerald City. Li Anping hesitated for a moment. He had seen that this bar was a place for exchanging intelligence. However, he didn't know what kind of person Dong Man was. If he told him directly that he was looking for a lone wolf, would it be good or bad? Dong Man seemed to see Li Anping's hesitation and said, "You don't have to make a decision in a hurry. This is my business card." As he spoke, he handed a business card to Li Anping. "Usually, I mainly ask people for information. If you have any questions, you can ask me. But for some more valuable information, I will charge some money." He. "Then I'll leave first, you think about it?" "Bartender, this brother's wine is on my head." After saying that, Dong Man waved and left his seat. "Wait," Li Anping stopped Dong Man, "I do have something to ask you." "Oh? What is it?" "Please introduce Emerald City to me." Li Anping took out a stack of banknotes from his arms and put it on the table. "Don't worry, I won't give you less money." Li Anping killed many bullies and corrupt officials along the way, and he robbed the rich to help the poor. Dong Man saw the money on Zhou Shang, and a trace of greed flashed in his eyes. He put all the money into his pocket. "What do you want to know? Tell me about the recent events of Zhongai Hall, Violet, and Kylan Group." Li Anping showed off the names he had just overheard. He decided to talk about this and that, and occasionally interspersed some questions about Lone Wolf, so that others could not see his true purpose. But he asked the right person. The bar where Li Anping was located was a gathering place for many retail investors in Emerald City. Some capable Lone Rangers who were unwilling to be inferior to others and pursued freedom often gathered here to exchange information. And Dong Man in front of him was a personal intelligence dealer. Maybe he didn't know some secrets or confidential things, or he knew them inaccurately, but he knew the surface news of Emerald City like the back of his hand. He then told the entanglement between Zhongyatang, Violet, and Kylan Group. On the surface, Emerald City still belongs to Daxia. But in fact, the contradiction between Daxia and the Northern Power Ice Castle is deepening, and the power of the entire country is leaning towards the army. So in the past few years, the government's influence on Emerald City has become less and less year by year. Coupled with the corruption of officials and backward systems, Daxia's influence in Emerald City can be said to be riddled with holes. However, in the government departments, the police system still relies on powerful force to restrain the other three major forces, so as not to make Emerald City out of control. The other three forces, one is the force Zhongyatang, which controls most of the Emerald City. It has been established for nearly 20 years and is an old force in Emerald City. It is inseparable from the local residents. Many young guys can't study, so they join Zhongyatang when they grow up and have a meal. Many times, it is even more useful to find them than to find the police. There are two more, one is called Violet, and the other is called Kylan Group. Violet is a transnational smuggling group, and sometimes it also takes drugs and arms business. As the most developed city in the south of Daxia, and on the border, directly bordering the southern countries, Jade City is naturally highly valued by Violet. However, their channels are different from Zhongyatang, so there is no conflict between the two parties, but they often cooperate. The last Kylan group entered Emerald City this year. He was originally a mercenary group mixed in the southern countries. The so-called southern countries refer to the 18 small countries south of Daxia, including Yunmiao Country, Bayu Country, and Fulun Country. All are located in the south of the East continent. Because of the barren land and scarce natural resources, Daxia has never been interested in these countries, so it has always let these small countries develop. Therefore, Yunmiao, Bayu, Fulun and other countries no longer have the threat of Daxia in the north, and in order to compete for the already scarce natural resources, they often wage wars, resulting in long-term chaos and social unrest in the 18 countries. Of course, there are also rumors that someone in the Daxia officialdom is specifically responsible for provoking conflicts between these small countries and preventing them from uniting. The Kylan Group is a relatively famous mercenary group among the 18 countries. The headquarters is in Bio country, and they often accept the country's employment and participate in wars. Half a year ago, for some unknown reason, they came to Emerald City and wanted to occupy a piece of land and develop in Emerald City. The local forces certainly disagreed, so under the leadership of Zhongai Hall, the local gangs and the Kylan Group fought several times. Although the Kylan Group is a professional fighter, it is said that two fists cannot beat four hands, and they are outnumbered. Under the attack of more than a dozen local gangs, they were defeated step by step, and even the leader was hit by several bullets and his life was at stake. But what happened next was even more shocking. The leader of the Kylan Group had a son who just turned 18 this year. His name was Fang Qi. He originally studied in a martial arts school in Bio country. After hearing the news that his father was seriously injured, he immediately rushed to Emerald City. Under the crisis, Fang Qi single-handedly withstood all the opposition and took over the position of leader. He immediately showed his amazing talent and terrible fighting power. Under his leadership, the Kylan Group was bound to win the battle and swept through the big and small gangs in Emerald City within 10 days. I don't know how many big guys were killed. In particular, the ace fighters of Zhongai Hall, known as the Four Heavenly Kings, were directly beaten back by Fang Qi alone, which shocked countless people. Seeing Dong Man talking excitedly and pointing fingers at Zhang Shan, Li Anping asked, "Is Fang Qi very powerful?" Even if he is powerful, it is unlikely that he can turn the tide of a battle involving hundreds or thousands of people by fighting 10 people alone. No matter how powerful he is, can he still compete with guns and cannons? That's not necessarily true. Dongman looked mysterious. "Brother, do you believe in superpowers?" Li Anping's face choked, and he stared at the other party closely, constantly recalling the other party's words and actions in his mind, wondering if the other party was targeting him. Seeing that he was staring directly at him, Dongman just smiled mysteriously. After a long time, Li Anping said word by word, "Fang Qi has superpowers." You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Man at the top of the food chain. Author, Xiong Go. Chapter 36. Hearing Li Anping's words, Dongman smiled even more happily, and his little eyes almost narrowed into slits. He didn't answer, just rubbed his thumb and index finger. Li Anping snorted and took out a wad of money from his pocket and gave it to him. He never expected that the information he had been looking for about ability users would actually be obtained from a reporting agent in a border city. Energy users are not secrets, but they are secrets. Ordinary people don't know much about them, but in the dark world, there is no one who doesn't know about ability users. Dongman stuffed the money into his pocket with satisfaction, and then said, "Ability is something that has been around for a long time. I am an ordinary person and don't know much about it. I only know that ability users are now classified as level 0 to level 5. In total, there are blood, parasitism, mutation, and field domain, 6 major systems in ancient times. Level 5, hey, didn't you say it's from level 0 to level 10 in total? How do I know?" He looked depressed, "but I remember that among human beings, abilities should be divided into 10 energy levels." Dongman was naturally unaware of the conversation between the two people in front of him, and continued, "In fact, in the Emerald City, whether it is Zhongai Hall, Zilalan, or the later Kylan Group, there is no shortage of strong men who can fight and fight. Naturally, there are also a few capable people. Of the 4 heavenly kings of Zhongai Hall mentioned earlier, I suspect that 2 of them are capable." Li Anping and He stopped talking, but listened carefully to what Dongman said. Although Jay was an ability user last time, his strength was not top-notch, and he probably didn't know as much as the intelligence dealer in front of him. And what Dongman said next also made Li Anping know more about ability users and the Emerald City. Emerald City is a city where black forces hold up half the sky. The struggles and fights between various gangs and organizations are commonplace. Especially this place is at the junction of Daxia and the southern countries. Many ability users and soldiers who retired from the wars between the 18 kingdoms in the south often come here. Ability users are beings with powers that far exceed those of ordinary humans. This is especially true on the battlefield. Whether it is a big country like Daxia or Ice Castle, or a small country such as Baiu or Folan in the south, ability users have always been one of the main forces on the battlefield. Their suddenness, concealment, mobility, and astonishing destructive power of those with high abilities have always been highly praised by the armies of various countries. The 18 kingdoms in the south have been fighting for many years, so they are naturally very skilled in fighting with abilities. Once an ability user in these countries is discovered, endless battles await him. The cultivation of capable people has always been permeated into the development of the country. For example, Fang Chi's hometown, Baiu Kingdom, is a country famous for its martial arts. It has developed many martial arts suitable for strengthening physical abilities, and the melee combat capabilities of its espers are second to none among the 18 kingdoms. And Fang Chi is such a capable martial arts master. According to rumors, he once single-handedly killed hundreds of gang members with heavy firepower. This is simply unimaginable in other cities in Daxia. You must know that Li Anping was not able to kill so many people at once in Zhongdu. Emerald City is probably the most chaotic city in Daxia, with the most conflicts breaking out every day. The density of ability users here is also much higher than in other cities. However, since Fang Chi defeated the 4 heavenly kings of Zhongai Hall in a battle, the entire dark world of Emerald City has begun to faintly spread Fang Chi's strongest voice, and even some exaggerated titles such as the most powerful person in the south, peerless genius, and martial saint. There is also a certain market. After all, ability users are not like martial arts novels, where the older they get, the more powerful they are. On the contrary, the younger they are, the better their physical fitness, the stronger their mental power, the easier it is to improve their ability levels, and their combat effectiveness. And Fang Chi's recent performance is also very convincing, and he is admired by a group of young people. However, in the face of the Kirin Regiment's desperate counterattack, established organizations such as Zhongai Tang and Violet will not be afraid of him. An earth-shattering fight is about to take place in the Emerald City, the capital of crime in Great Xia. In this way, while Dongmen was talking, Li Anping asked a few questions from time to time. It didn't take long for him to understand the 3 major forces in Emerald City. He said it so much that he was frothing at the mouth in winter and still had more to say. At this moment, Li Anping suddenly asked, "There seem to be many human traffickers in Emerald City. When I came here, I saw several people abducting women." Hearing what Li Anping said, Dongman smiled nonchalantly. "What does this mean?" "People are missing every day in the entire Emerald City. And it can be said that in the Emerald City, if a person is missing for more than 48 hours, then even it's the police, even the Daxia government can't find it again." Li Anping's face changed, and his tone was a little hard. "Oh? Where have they gone?" However, Dongmen didn't notice the change in Li Anping's tone and replied directly, "Where else can we go? In Baiu and Falan in the south, the pornography industry is legal in several countries. There is also the trade of human organs, the trade of female slaves, and even some the high-quality goods will be exported to major countries such as the Federation and the Codex country in the western continent." Li Anping asked again, "Don't they sell to Daxia people? Is there such a transaction in Emerald City? What? Do you want to buy it?" Dongmen patted Li Anping on the shoulder and said with a smile, "I can't tell, you are so good. But Daxia is very strict in this regard. Emerald City is fine, but other places, if you want to raise a female slave, You won't be able to do it without some power. Li Enping also smiled and said, I don't necessarily want to buy it, I just want to see if you have a place to introduce it. It would be best to have a larger quantity. Dongman smiled obscenely after hearing this. I see. Then I'll introduce you to a place with a large quantity and a wide variety of goods. High-ranking officials and wealthy businessmen from the mainland often send their men to buy goods. And they are all trained and will definitely not run away or commit suicide. Dongman took out a pen and paper from his arms and wrote an address for him. Go to this address. If someone asks you who introduced you, just tell me my name. Dongman patted his chest and said. Li Enping picked up the note and suddenly asked, is this place owned by Lone Wolf? Dongman's face changed. Where did you hear this name from? Since I even know about the ability users, I can naturally hear this name. Li Enping took out a stack of banknotes from his arms and handed it to Dongman from under the table. A friend told me that Lone Wolf's goods are the best in the entire Emerald City. So I want to ask you if it is true. Dongman took the money and said, then your friend knows a lot, but the entire Emerald City's human business is done by Lone Wolf. Even if it is Zhonggaiatang, Kylan Group or Violet, they only buy people from them. Oh, snatching people from these three organizations, then this Lone Wolf is really powerful. Li Enping smiled, tell me about them. Dongman frowned, the Lone Wolf's people are too dangerous, they are all a group of scum. Generally, I don't want to sell their news. Once people know about it, I will be in trouble. I'm not a policeman, I'm just curious, can you tell me more? After that, Li Enping stuffed another wad of money into Dongman's arms. Dongman pretended to push it, then took the money, and then said, let's go, there are too many people here, let's go out and talk. Li Enping nodded and followed Dongman. The two walked out of the bar. Li Enping followed Dongman around, turned into a dark alley, and Dongman stopped. Li Enping looked at Dongman looking around, and wanted to tell him that there was no one around, and he could see or hear if there was anyone. But obviously this is unrealistic. And for intelligence traders like Dongman, being able to survive in Emerald City until now, it is essential to be cautious. It took about 10 minutes for Dongman to make sure that no one was following or eavesdropping, and he said to Li Enping, sorry for the long wait. It's really that the Lone Wolf gang is too bad. It's okay for us to talk about the news of Zhongai Hall, Violet, or Kylan Group. But I don't know how many people were killed by the Lone Wolf's people. Seeing Li Enping nodded to show his understanding, Dongman continued, the Lone Wolf gang is not from Daxia. 7 or 8 years ago, more than a dozen people came from the south. Now, there are already 400 or even 500 people. They came from Loxing Mountain in Yingxi, which is the nest of scum and the place of exile for criminals. Even the mercenaries are reluctant to provoke people there. You know, since the natural disaster 50 years ago, small countries in the south like Yingxi have had a harder time. Their gang's favorite thing to do is to abduct and sell women. At the beginning, they recruited young women from small countries in the south to work as nannies and maids in Daxia. But once the girls sneaked in, they used violence and drugs to control them and made them prostitutes. They also traded some human organs, mainly from children. However, in recent years, they found that they could make more money by directly kidnapping young girls from Daxia and selling them to rich people in the south and abroad. Emerald City is the best environment for kidnapping. Girls who disappeared here will never be found again. After hearing the news about Lone Wolf, Li Enping nodded with a heavy face, and asked again, have you heard of the Shadow Cult? Dongman was confused and asked, what does this have to do with the Shadow Cult? Wait, you don't really believe the rumor about Lone Wolf's resurrection? This is just a rumor. Nothing. Li Enping shook his head and turned away, I don't have anything to ask, goodbye. Dongman looked at the other person's back, opened his mouth, and finally couldn't help saying, I don't know what your purpose is, maybe your friend was captured, maybe your wife is missing. but I advise you to give up. No one has ever found the missing here. Li Anping heard what Dong Man said, paused, but didn't say a word. Then he quickly left the alley. Man at the top of the food chain. Author, Xiong Go. Chapter 37. While Li Anping was inquiring, on the other side of the city, the Special Service Department of the Municipal Police Department was also having a headache about an imminent matter. The Special Service Department is under the jurisdiction of Daxia Longke and is responsible for managing the ability users in Emerald City. Although it is a public security system in name, it is actually its own system and can even use police resources at will in many matters. The Secret Service was unwilling to intervene this time when Violet and the Kylan group were fighting in Zhonggai Hall. Instead, they preferred to sit back and watch the fight, and finally come out with a strong stance to clean up the mess. However, this seems to be quite relaxing on the surface, but on the inside, you have to pay attention to the development of the situation at all times, and do not let the fight between the three get out of hand. After all, their biggest goal is to maintain stability. As for the struggle between the three major organizations, especially the battle between ability users, any slight relaxation may cause huge riots. Maybe it is nothing to the whole of Daxia, but to the officials here, it is related to tangible political achievements and whether they can continue to be the emperor here. But an unexpected incident broke their plan. SpecialAbilities? Why did he come? When did Tianjing's Secret Service headquarters start to care about a remote place like ours? I can't figure it out. There are small-scale conflicts in the north every day. I heard that the Flame Dragon Vanguard of Ice Castle has sent out the Thunder Emperor and White Dwarf. How could he come to us at this time? No matter it is Thunder Emperor or White Dwarf, any one of them has city-destroying combat power, but at this time. Is there someone restless in the south again? Speaking of Fang Qi from the Kylan regiment, his teacher must be from the royal family of Bio Kingdom. Stop guessing, take a look at this, it was sent to me by Huang Linjun. Huh? Do you still have contact with him? What is this, Li Anping? You were just recruited and sent here to us. Want to seize power? Want to cleanse the Emerald City before the war in the north? Are you kidding me? You can't believe everything Huang Linjun says. In short, let's send someone to find this Li Anping first and then test it out. If it doesn't work, we can only clean it up. What about SpecialAbilities? He's not easy to deal with. Humph, he hasn't come yet. With so many people missing in the Emerald City every year, no one has ever been found. 6 hours later, Emerald City, Diamond Street. Colorful neon lights lit up the entire street. Amidst the feasting, you can see that from the street to the end of the street, there are small high-rise buildings on both sides of the more than 100-meter-long road. However, the first floor of the small high-rise buildings is filled with rows of display windows. Behind the display windows are people wearing scantily clad clothes. The woman was posing and posing. It was almost midnight, but still from time to time, several men would take a photo of a certain woman outside the window, and they would hug the chosen woman and walk to the floor above the window. This is a red light district in the Emerald City, and it is also a location provided by Dongman. Under the superficial erotic trade, deeper here, there is also a sinful slave trade. Compared with the huge profits from the female slave trade, the income from business on the street is just a drop in the bucket. Generally, only workers and office workers spend money there. And the quality of the women in those windows are also very average. It is rare for some beautiful ones to be hired away by larger nightclubs or managers within a few days. Most of the women in the window do so voluntarily, either in need of money urgently or indulging in material desires. As long as they pay the lone wolf protection fee, they can do business here. The lone wolf, on the other hand, provides the venue and protection. Amid the crowds of people coming and going, Li Anping put on a backpack and strolled through the red light district. His eyes swept through the windows and the crowd without stopping at all. He didn't walk fast, but his eyes never stopped in one place. He always looked back and forth, and sometimes he would listen attentively, as if he was searching for something. But until he walked around, he didn't do anything. Instead, he found a roadside stall and sat down. "Boss, a bowl of little chaos." The owner of the roadside stall is an old man who is over 60 years old. He specializes in providing late-night snacks such as wontons and noodles to the hungry clients who come home at midnight. "I set up a stall on this street every night and earn some money to support my family." Li Anping ordered a bowl of wontons, sat down, and took out a thick dictionary from his backpack. It was an Indo-Spanish dictionary. Opening the dictionary, Li Anping flipped through the thick dictionary quickly as if he was playing. If an ordinary person looked at it from the back, he might not be able to see even a single word clearly, and could only see the pages that were turned quickly. After learning about Lone Wolf from Dong Man, he went to a library and bought a few books. Some of the books he couldn't find were downloaded from the internet, printed out and put in his backpack. The dictionary was quickly flipped through, just like a computer. The words were quickly input into Li Anping's brain, and then memorized, with a photographic memory. This enviable talent was possessed by Li Anping after he was strengthened. However, this was the first time for him to learn a language by memorizing so many things in a short period of time. Half an hour later, Li Anping closed the dictionary, closed his eyes, and the words in his mind popped up one after another. "Hey," said, "how is it, do you remember everything?" Li Anping didn't speak. After a long time, he opened his eyes. A flash of understanding flashed in his eyes and said, "About 70%, it's just a simple memory, but I should be able to basically understand what they said, and ordinary conversations should be fine. Hey, when are you going to do it? The address is written here, but now it seems that it is all voluntary flesh trade here. The transactions of those abducted girls are probably at a deeper level. Oh, do you want to use that Dong Man's introduction? No need, after all, he is not a trustworthy person." Li Anping shook his head and looked at the colorful diamond street where people came and went. "Now that I can understand what they say, I can naturally find them to catch the lone wolf in one fell swoop. We must find all the members from bottom to top in secret, then we will clean them all up from top to bottom. I want to let none of them go. Find them first." As he said, Li Anping stood up and walked towards the window on the street. He walked and stopped. Although every woman kept throwing flirtatious eyes at him, he did not stop for a step. He looked at dozens of women like a horse, and he just frowned and shook his head with disdain. A look of dissatisfaction. "Handsome guy, come in and play," as if attracting the attention of others. A woman with heavy makeup and a hot body leaned against the door and shouted to Li Anping. "Don't come out, old vegetable peel." Li Anping glanced at her and scolded, "Don't you have any fresh goods here?" The woman's face changed after being scolded a few times, but she still persuaded him kindly. "Handsome guy, come in first, I have many good sisters, all white and big breasts. Handsome guy, come and see." "Get out, old vegetable peel, if I go in, you have to give me money." The strange behavior of the two people has long attracted the attention of passers-by. Li Anping looked at several people pointing and scolded a few more times and left. The woman looked at Li Anping's back and couldn't help but cursed in a low voice, "Poor guy, why are you pretending to be a big shot here?" Li Anping stopped walking and immediately turned around, pointing at the woman's nose and cursing, "Who are you talking about? Who are you talking about? Say it again." "Ha ha, whoever pretends to be a big shot, I'm talking about." The woman was also angry. She put her hands on her waist and cursed Li Anping, using foul language. Li Anping was not to be outdone, and cursed the woman with a red neck. The two of them were very loud and soon attracted the attention of passers-by. A few minutes later, two men, one tall and one short, rushed over, held Li Anping's arms, and took him away. The quarrel ended and the crowd quickly dispersed. Only a few caring people looked at Li Anping, who was taken away with pity in their eyes. "Let me go. What do you want to do? Where are you taking me? If you don't let me go, I'll call the police." Li Anping shouted and waved his hands vigorously, but he couldn't break free from the two men's arms. The three of them pushed and shoved, and walked into the alley on the side. One of the tall and thin men pushed Li Anping against the wall, pointed at his forehead and shouted, "Boy, who allowed you to come here to make trouble? Do you know whose territory this is?" The other short man stood behind with his hands on his chest and looked at Li Anping with ill intentions. The tall and thin man punched Li Anping in the stomach and threatened, "You just made us do at least 5 fewer business trips, take out 1,000 yuan, quickly." Li Anping leaned against the wall, holding his stomach with both hands, and said weakly, I don't have so much money." "Don't talk nonsense, take it out quickly." The tall and thin man punched Li Anping again. Li Anping whimpered, tremblingly took out his wallet from his arms, and half of it was snatched away by the tall and thin man. "Lucky for you, don't let me see you again in the future." The tall and thin man took out all the money in the wallet and showed a hint of joy. Then he threw the wallet on the ground, spit at Li Anping and left. He walked to the short man and gave him half of the money. The two looked at each other, nodded and left. As they walked, they talked in Indo-Spanish. It would be nice if there were more of these big summer pigs every day. "Go back quickly, don't let Barto change your cards." The two men gradually left the alley, but they didn't notice that a pair of cold eyes were staring at them in the dark. Man at the top of the food chain. Author, Xianglango. Chapter 38. After two thugs, one tall and one short, blackmailed Li Anping, they returned to a small house at the corner of Diamond Street. In addition to the tall and short people, there are two strong men. After seeing the two of them coming back, he urged them to sit down quickly and continue the unfinished card game. The four of them were playing cards and drinking beer. "Bato, didn't you secretly change the cards while we were away?" "Go to hell, Vicky, play your cards right now, I'm going to win all your shorts today." The four of them kept chatting in Indian and Spanish. But he didn't notice that a black shadow was quietly lurking outside the house. "Monitor every move of the four people." Black asked, "What are they talking about?" "It's nothing. The thin man's name is Vicky, and the strong man's name is Bato. They were talking about football matches, female stars, and—" Li Anping frowned, "They cursed me a few times." "Hey hey." Hai Zi smiled and said, "Just rush in, torture them to find out who their superiors are, and then kill them all." I said, "I don't want to let anyone go." Li Anping's expression was grim, "So I can't alert the enemy, I have to find their leader first, or identify all the people, and then kill them one by one." I said I wouldn't let anyone go, so if there are 10, 5, or 1 missing, it won't work. Hay was stunned for a moment, then laughed, okay, kill them all, leave no one behind. Don't let me down." In the room, the skinny Vicky won a few more games and put away the money with a smile. A strong man said angrily, "Vicky, you kid is not rich. Bato, you can't afford to lose, so don't play any more." Vicky laughed, "At worst, I'll treat you to a good time tomorrow. Those stinky bitches are not interesting, but the goods they snatched are strong and beautiful enough." "Bato, shut your stinky mouth," another person said curiously. "Vicky, I heard that you hummed a kidnapped girl until she foamed at the mouth and died. Is that true?" "Ha ha ha ha." Vicky laughed with a face full of pride, "That woman kept begging for mercy. While licking me, she begged me to let her go. Ha 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 ha, the women in Daxia are more tender than us. Be obedient, it's fun to do it. Do you want to play too? Don't worry, you guys have to work hard here first, and if there are any extra things above, they will give them to you to play with." Li Anping outside the house clenched his fists, and then slowly relaxed them. In this way, the two of them kept sneaking, lurking outside the house until 6 in the morning. The 4 people inside the house went out several times, either to eat or to he taught the prostitutes a lesson, but never got the information Li Anping needed. For example, who is the superior, where is he, and how to find him. Another round of cards was over. Skinny Vicky stood up, stretched and said, "I'm exhausted. I'm going back to rest first. You can continue your work. See you tonight. See you tonight." Seeing Vicky walking out of the room, Li Anping's eyes lit up and he followed him. The morning in the Emerald City looked foggy due to severe air pollution. Vicky was walking on the deserted street, and for some reason, she suddenly felt a little scared. Hell, the air quality here is getting worse. If this continues, I'm going to get lung cancer one day. As Vicky walked, she covered her mouth with one hand, hoping to breathe less poisonous gas. But halfway through, a dark figure suddenly appeared in the haze in front of him, walking slowly towards him. "Who? Who's there?" Vicky yelled alertly. No one answered, and Vicky could only listen to the footsteps getting closer and closer. This is the Emerald City. To be on the safe side, he pulled out a pistol from his belt, turned on the safety, and kept his eyes focused on the direction in which the shadow was coming. A few seconds later, a 9 or 10-year-old boy came out of the haze and saw Vicky aiming a gun at him. He was so frightened that he shouted, "Don't shoot, don't shoot, I'm just delivering newspapers." Vicky glanced at the other person's thin body and tattered clothes, glanced at the pile of newspapers the other person was carrying, put away the pistol, and cursed, "Damn it, why didn't you when I called you earlier, answer?" "I'm not afraid of getting into trouble," the boy explained, and then ran away, as if he was afraid that Vicky would pull out a gun and shoot him again. Seeing the boy peeing in fear, Vicky laughed heartlessly. The people of Daxia are so timid. Halfway through his words, a pair of arms suddenly stretched out from behind him and dragged him deeper into the haze. "Woo! Woo!" Vicky struggled hard, but a huge force came over him, and his vision turned black and he fainted. In a daze, Vicky gradually regained consciousness. He opened his eyes, which were still a little blurry. He struggled hard and found that he had been tied to a chair. He shook his dizzy head, and the scene in front of him gradually became clearer. In a simple dormitory, a tall and strong young man sat in front of him. The young man held a book in his hand and was reading it seriously. It was as if he didn't even notice that he had woken up. From Vicky's perspective, it can be seen that the cover of the book seems to read, "The Art of Interrogation." It looks familiar. This place. Li Anping put down the book and saw Vicky's wary look on his face, and said lightly, "This is the dormitory where you used to imprison them, but now that you are gone, I will borrowed and used." Seeing Wei Wei's silence, Li Anping didn't care. He raised the book in his hand and said, "Originally, this book was prepared for you, but after reading it, I was a little disappointed. It was too gentle. It is indeed a published book, which are mainly psychological attacks and verbal attacks. I think you will be disappointed if you use these things. Is it you? Who are you? Do you want to take revenge on me?" Vicky seemed to recognize Li Anping as the person he blackmailed and beat yesterday. He said bitterly, "The lone wolf will not let you go." Li Anping just smiled. "I later downloaded some information from the internet. Some of the torture methods on it were very interesting." As he said this, Li Anping took out a stack of information from his backpack and started reading. Caning punishment means wooden stake punishment. The caning punishment mentioned here is not beating someone with a stick. The caning punishment mentioned here is to insert a stick directly into the person's mouth or anus, and the whole stick is immersed and penetrated. The gastrointestinal tract makes death miserable. Well, there is also here, inserting a needle between the fingernails. Oh, and this electrocution, it is really non-toxic and harmless. Listening to Li Anping's torture reports one by one, Vicky had no reaction and just looked at him with contempt. Li Anping stopped, walked in front of Vicky, and said slowly, "We still have 12 hours until you go to Diamond Street for duty next time. In other words, no one will find out that you have been kidnapped for at least 12 hours. We have a lot of time to play. But I still give you a chance to suffer less. Tell me, who is your leader?" Vicky just glared at Li Anping fiercely, and then spit on Li Anping's chest. Li Anping glanced at Vicky coldly, then tore off a piece of the other person's clothes, picked it up and wiped the saliva off his body. Then, regardless of the other person's struggle, he crushed the pieces of clothes into a ball and stuffed them into the other person's mouth. It's a pity that the materials here are rudimentary. Let's just start with our fingers. As he spoke, Li Anping picked up the other person's hand and pulled out the little finger. He held the other person's finger with his right hand, and then slowly and firmly squeezed it. A heartbreaking sound of bones breaking was heard, and then he saw veins popping up on Vicky's forehead, struggling violently. Unfortunately, he was tied up, and Li Anping's other hand was also on his body. He couldn't escape at all. Nen watched helplessly as his fingers were crushed into a bloody mess. Li Anping reached out and took out the piece of clothing from Vicky's mouth, and asked, "How many strongholds do you have in the Emerald City? Where are the female slaves sold?" "You lunatic," Vicky roared angrily, "I swear I will kill you. We will not let you go. We will arrest all your female relatives and sell them to the filthiest and most despicable one's brothel. Let them, woo-woo." Halfway through his words, Li Anping gagged him again. Li Anping sneered and said, "It seems you haven't learned your lesson yet." As he spoke, he grabbed the other person's other ring finger and pinched it slowly. Vicky shook her head violently and yelled in her heart, "No, don't want, don't want, don't want," but Li Anping still pressed it in his eyes. Severe pain hit him. Vicky's body arched up, tears kept pouring from his eyes, and he whimpered from his blocked mouth. "Woo." The sound of struggle. "I really don't have much patience. You'd better answer me quickly. For example, where are the girls you are imprisoning?" After the cloth was removed, Vicky just gasped desperately, feeling the heart-wrenching pain in his fingers. Looking at the two fingers that had turned into a ball of meat paste, a mixture of bones and residue, he looked at Li Anping with fear in his eyes. "I don't know anything. I really just came here the day before yesterday. I didn't do anything." Li Anping shook his head regretfully, "Sorry Vicky, that's not what you said when I heard you playing cards yesterday. For example, did the girl you killed remind you of anything?" After saying that, he ignored Wei. Chi defended himself, and Li Anping stuffed his mouth again. This time he held Vicky's middle finger and index finger together, and then looked at him. I saw Vicky struggling desperately, shaking his head constantly, with a look of pleading in his eyes. "Whoa." Li Anping ignored it. He exerted force with his right hand, and a ball of blood burst out from his palm. When he let go of his hand, blood continued to flow from Vicky's palm, and the owner of the finger turned white with pain. Almost fainted. Li Anping didn't move at all, he just took out the cloth from his mouth. "You better say something I want to hear. There are only two female slave markets, one on Diamond Street and the other on Paradise Road. There are only these two, I swear. What about your leader? Where is he?" "I don't know." When Vicky saw Li Anping trying to stuff the cloth in again, he quickly shouted, "I really don't know, he has been hiding recently. Please. Please. I really don't know." Li Anping ignored him, just stuffed the cloth into his mouth, and then held the middle and index fingers of Vicky's other hand together. Li Anping only exerted slight force, and the two fingers gradually deformed. "Woo. Woo." Vicky struggled hard and kept shaking his head at Li Anping. In his excitement, a lot of blood began to flow from the injured hand. Li Anping snorted coldly, let go of his hand, took the cloth away from his mouth, and said, you'd better say something useful. Vic cried, Heaven Road, all in Heaven Road. In addition to some supply channels, the boss has recently gathered everyone to Heaven Road, saying that he wants to make a big deal. That's all I know, please let me go. Please. Vic waved his bare hands and looked at Li Anping pitifully and begged. Li Anping just shook his head, after you go to hell, go and talk to those girls. Next, a series of screams from Vic were heard in the dormitory. After a few seconds, the screams stopped abruptly, and only Li Anping walked out covered in blood. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Man at the top of the food chain. Author, Seong Lang-go. Chapter 39. A basement on Diamond Street. Li Anping followed two Indian and Westerners to the elevator. One of them asked, Sir, is this your first time here? Well, Vicky introduced me here. He said that there is an auction here every night. Li Anping said in proficient Indo-Spanish, I didn't expect that you can buy female slaves in Daxia. I'm really excited. Hearing what Li Anping said about Vicky and his proficiency in Indo-Spanish, the man seemed more assured and introduced, Sir, you picked the right place. There is nothing you can't find at our Lone Wolf auction dishes. Wife, students, models, even well-trained female slaves, beautiful dogs, we can tailor them for you. You can state your requirements and what kind of dishes you want to find, including body shape, height, and appearance. Oh? You can mention it. Li Anping didn't believe it. Can you find any woman here? The man smiled and said, Haha, because we accept reservations in advance, as long as you make a request and pay enough money, we will definitely help you find it. Not only that, we also launch related training commissions. Sir, not only can you request the other parties, you can also ask for the other person's temperament in terms of appearance. Whether you want a mature lady, a young lady, or a masochist, we can satisfy you. Li Anping sighed, it's really amazing. I wonder who the big shot is behind the lone wolf? I would have died 10 or 8 times if the background was not strong. Li Anping asked the question in his heart, if the lone wolf, if he can really do this, it is obvious that the power hidden behind him is more dangerous than Li Anping imagined. Sir, of course we have our own strength. The man could not tell Li Anping so simply. He smiled mysteriously and said, Sir, I wish you a pleasant stay. The elevator door opened, and a stage appeared in front of Li Anping amid the light. He walked out of the elevator and found that the round tables under the stage were already full of people. Then a waiter walked up to him and led him to an empty seat. On the way, he asked if he needed a mask. Only then did Li Anping realize that under the dark stage, almost everyone was wearing a mask, obviously not wanting others to know their identity. Li Anping casually took the white human mask handed by the waiter and put it on, and sat down. He looked towards the stage with his eyes and listened to the sounds around him. He found that no one around him seemed to be interested in talking, and there was almost no sound from anyone. Either looking at the phone, being in a daze, or watching the juggling performances on the stage. As for the sound insulation device behind the stage, Li Anping had no way of hearing the sound there. So he patiently waited for the auction to begin. Behind the stage, a man with slicked back hair sat on a lounge chair, smoking a cigar. There were several bodyguards in black standing beside him. At this time, a waiter suddenly rushed in a panic and shouted in Indian and Spanish, Brother, brother, something is wrong. Lu Haoshan and Kui Dao Jialan had a quarrel and killed Kui Dao Jialan. Why are you so anxious? The man with the back, who was called the eldest brother, stood up and said disdainfully, the dead person is not some Kui Dao Jialan, that is a dead person. Just send someone to throw him into the trash can. The man behind the scenes is named Koto. He is the second in command of the Lone Wolf and is in charge of the female slave market on Diamond Street all year round. During this period, although Lone Wolf's main force was concentrated on Paradise Street, he still stayed on Diamond Street to manage his business. The younger brother on the side asked, "What will happen if the Kylan group pursues the case?" Kato said impatiently, "Pursue Mao, tell them to go to Zhongai Hall. It has nothing to do with us. I didn't kill the person." After saying that, he ignored the matter. Instead, consider its recent Lone Wolf course of action. During this period, the leader of Lone Wolf focused almost all of his attention on the incident on Paradise Street. He gathered all the people there and took away a group of high-quality girls at once, which directly led to other incidents. Businesses are either closed or struggling to survive. Even here on Diamond Street, people are criticizing because the quality of the goods is getting lower and lower. Kato also began to worry. What on earth is the boss doing? If this continues, it will be troublesome if other forces interfere in our business. In addition, Kato was also troubled by the battle between the Zhongai Hall and the Violet Group in the city. Not only has it affected their business, both parties have been asking them to join, but the leader of Lone Wolf has always remained neutral on this. Kato absolutely disagrees with this. A neutral will only face the wrath of the winner in the end. And judging from the recent news, Fang Chi's combat power is very strong, and I am afraid that no one in the Lone Wolf can defeat him. The Zhongai Hall side is not simple either. Their boss, the father of Lu Haoshan who caused trouble in the auction house just now, is named Lu Jun. It is rumored that this man once had a head-on fight with Daxia Lonke. However, the top leaders of the Dark World knew that all these were just rumors boasted by Lu Jun. He had indeed fought against the Daxia Lonke people, but he was only seriously injured by a soldier of the other side. The three giants of Daxia Lonke, Longxiang, Zhurong, and Fei Zhang, are all capable of destroying cities and countries. If Lu Jun could really fight with any of the three of them without dying, there would be no one in the Emerald City to fight with. He fought and gave it to him. But the opponent is Daxia Lonke after all, so Lu Jun's strength is still worthy of recognition. And his performance in the Emerald City has not disappointed. As for Violet, the strength of the multinational group cannot be underestimated. It is said that they have asked for help from the headquarters and experts will be sent over soon. Thinking of this, Kato sighed, hoping that the boss really had some hidden trump card to prevent them from being torn into pieces by these three major forces. Is it really the Shadow Cult? Kato subconsciously thought of the rumor again. At this moment, the waiter from before suddenly rushed in again and shouted, "No. No. Nope, boss." "What's wrong?" Before Kato could finish his words, he heard screams coming from the auction venue. Auction hall, 10 minutes ago. Just after Li Anping sat down, several more guests walked out of the elevator one after another. All of them had put on masks before getting out of the elevator. They obviously came here often. He asked, "You want to wait until all the customers have arrived before you start? These people bidding for female slaves are obviously not good people. I'll just wait a little longer and then kill them all together." He, Li Anping, you are becoming more and more murderous. Li Anping was stunned. Just when he was about to retort, the elevator door opened again, and a man who looked very fat, silly, and like a ball walked in. This man didn't wear a mask, and as soon as he came in, he attracted almost everyone's attention, because he actually held two naked and half-clothed women in his hands. The two women's hair was disheveled, their eyes were dull, and their bodies were covered with traces of being violated. It was obvious that he had suffered serious injuries both mentally and physically. For a moment, all eyes were attracted to these two naked women, and the whole venue was filled with whispers. "Look, it's the grand finale at the end of last month, twin beautiful dogs. This fat guy is really rich. He is Lu Haoshan, the only son of the boss of Zhongai Hall, so naturally this is not a problem." Some people said with envy, "Tisk tisk, those twin beautiful dogs are really good things." Even here in Lone Wolf, I'm afraid I can only see them once a year. Hey, such a good thing was really ruined by this fat man. On the other side, the fat man Lu Haoshan picked his nose, kicked the beautiful dog at his feet, and cursed, "Quickly go, I was hummed by Wang Ke at home today, right? Hurry up, or I will go back and send you to the dog room." Hearing this, the beautiful dog at his feet trembled and quickly crawled forward. The other beautiful dog kept rubbing its body against Lu Haoshan, as if to please him and plead for his sister. Lu Haoshan led two beautiful dogs and swaggered towards the empty table closest to the stage, which was obviously the seat he had reserved long ago. A man suddenly stood up, pointed at Lu Haoshan and asked, "Fat man, I bought these two beautiful dogs of yours. Please give me a price." As soon as he finished saying this, he saw that all the whispers around him stopped. They stood down and looked at the man with wide eyes, as if they were saying, "You are a fool." Huh. Lu Haoshan also stopped and turned to look at the man. "You called me, fatty. Why fat man? I am Kui Dao Jialan of the Kailan regiment. Think about it clearly. Do you want to sell me or not?" the man asked arrogantly, as if he was unsheathing the long sword in his arms. It turned out to be Kui Dao Jialan. Someone whispered in surprise, "He is the #1 swordsman in the Kailan regiment. Legend has it that he can cut incoming bullets with a knife." Some people were looking forward to watching the fun. It's him. Now there's something good to watch. The people from Zhongai Hall and Kailan group have never dealt with each other. It's another fight between dragons and tigers. Fang Qi just defeated the 4 heavenly kings of Zhongai Hall some time ago. Lu Haoshan will surrender this time. Hearing the whispers of the people around him, Quadao Jialan looked at Lu Haoshan with a proud expression, while Lu Haoshan on the side ignored them completely. "Fat, you actually called me fat?" Lu Haoshan roared angrily. "No one can call me fat." After saying that, Lu Haoshan's body suddenly swelled, and his body, which was already like a ball, became even fatter and bigger. Then it rushed over like a cannonball. "Damn fat man! Don't blame me for your own death." Jialan, the sharp knife, cursed in shock, drew out his long knife and slashed at Lu Haoshan. Unexpectedly, when the long knife struck Lu Haoshan's body, a strange force came out. The blade was hit by the opponent's fat flesh and was shocked, unable to penetrate the flesh at all. The next moment, he was knocked against the wall by Lu Haoshan with his knife. After a loud bang, only a pool of human flesh and blood was left on the wall, slowly falling. Everyone in the venue was surprised, and seemed to be frightened by Lu Haoshan's amazing destructive power. Several people who obviously came with Kui Dao Jialan saw that one of them was instantly killed by Lu Haoshan with one blow. Some of their original thoughts were immediately given up, and they sat down silently and stopped talking. A few minutes later, several staff members walked out from behind the auction house and swept the bodies on the wall into the trash can. As for Kui Dao Jialan, who was so majestic just a few minutes ago, he will be forgotten in a few days. "You bastard, you dare to call me fat? Even my father can't call me that." Lu Haoshan picked his nose, walked back to the original place, picked up the two beautiful dogs, and walked towards the seat. The two beautiful dogs seemed to be particularly afraid of the angry Lu Haoshan. They trembled all over when being led, kept running back and forth, and barked to please each other. Li Anping on the side withdrew his gaze, but there seemed to be a red light slowly brewing in his eyes. He gloated, he, "I feel that the fire in your heart can burn the entire Emerald City. This is the stupidity and greed of human beings that never change." Li Anping said coldly, "Yes, when all the people for this auction are here, I will start. I don't want to wait even a minute or a second." After waiting for a while, some customers came one after another, and the auction finally started. A neatly dressed host walked onto the stage and began to introduce, "Thank you all for participating in today's auction. Today, our product catalog has been placed on the table in front of you. Okay, without further ado, let's invite the first item to the stage." Before he finished speaking, a chair suddenly flew up, and with a whistling sound, the chair leg pierced the host's eye socket, and then he fell down with a look of astonishment on his face. Man at the top of the food chain. Author, Seong Lang-go. Chapter 40. As the host fell down, there was a cry of exclamation. Li Anping also stood up, took off his mask and walked to the stage. Two lone wolf waiters tried to stop him midway, but he casually slit their necks and fell into a pool of blood. Looking at the commotion of the crowd in the audience, Li Anping laughed, "Scumbags, I'm here to kill you. Before you die, please resist as much as you can." What? What a joke. What about the lone wolf? That's outrageous. Several lone wolf gunmen rushed over again. This time they held pistols and pointed at Li Anping and slowly approached. Apparently, Li Anping's killing method just now aroused their vigilance. "Put your head in your hands. Come down slowly." In response, Li Anping just smiled and threw the microphone on the stage at the gunman. Amidst the whistling sound, the other person's head exploded like a watermelon falling to the ground. "I will personally send you to hell to repent." The next moment a gunshot rang out. Li Anping didn't care, letting the bullet pierce his body, and then watched the wound slowly heal. Only when a few bullets hit his face would he subconsciously block them with his hands. Taking a step with his right foot, he had already left the stage and appeared in the crowd. One after another, people pulled out their pistols and aimed at Li Anping. Among them were lone wolves, customers, and customer bodyguards. The bullets slanted down like raindrops, but Li Anping dodged them at will. He rushed into the crowd, breaking his neck or piercing the heart with his hands, constantly creating death. Amidst the laughter, a round table suddenly flew up and was waved by Li Anping like a toy. Finally, it was thrown out, causing a shower of blood in the crowd. The elevator door not far away opened, and another group of gunmen rushed in with submachine guns. The muzzles of their guns were all pointed at Li Anping, and they sprayed out deadly fire snakes, beating Li Anping's body with holes and making him retreat repeatedly. "Roar!" Li Anping roared angrily, jumped into the middle of the gunmen with a slight jump, and like a phantom flashing past, more than a dozen gunmen fell down gushing blood. Seeing the remaining gunmen looking at him in despair, Li Anping smiled, put his hand into the heart of one of them, and then took it out and crushed it. Amidst the screams, he casually tore the other man in half, and blood sprinkled on his body like rain, dyeing his body blood red. But there was still a violent voice calling him in his heart. "Kill, kill them all to your heart's content, these beasts don't deserve to live in this world." A gunman rushed toward him while shouting and shooting. Li Anping dodged slightly and appeared behind him. He grabbed his skull with one hand and twisted the other person's head 180 degrees. Gunshots rang out from behind him again. Li Anping lifted the gunman's body, whose head was turned 180 degrees, and threw it toward the roof. Bang! A large pile of flesh and blood spilled down from the air. Screams and cries kept ringing out in the venue, and the entire auction house was in chaos. The remaining gunmen roared and shot at Li Anping, but they could not stop him for a second until the bullets were fired. Li Anping's hands brought death after death among the crowd. Bullets kept passing through his body, but they were unable to cause fatal injuries to him. The wounds would often heal after a few seconds. The person who fired the shot would be killed by Li Anping, who rushed over in the next second. Either dig out the heart or tear it into pieces, it all depends on Li Anping's mood. Another group of gunmen rushed into the venue. The leader actually carried a rocket launcher. Looking at the other party pulling the trigger, Li Anping casually threw the round table next to him. In mid-air, boom! There was a sound, and a flower of flame bloomed in the hall. After the violent explosion, the sweeping air wave overturned everyone around, and a large number of people fell directly to the ground. Li Anping only felt dizzy, but he was still intact, and the shrapnel on his body was squeezed out by his muscles in a few seconds. but a dozen guests who were close to the explosion were bleeding from their orifices and had been shocked to death. Li Anping dodged another hail of bullets. He rushed towards the gunmen who were still resisting in an S-shape. Facing the opponent's almost desperate wail, Li Anping grabbed a gunman and swung it on the spot. Like a death storm, all the gunmen around him were swept away, and a series of screams sounded like music from hell. When Li Anping stopped, the corpse in his hand had become a piece of rotten flesh with no appearance. Ha 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 ha, you all have to die today, die, 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 you scum. Finally, all the gunmen realized that something was wrong. They and everyone in the hall began to scream and run away. The venue had turned into a hell of Shura, but Li Anping chased and killed everyone who wanted to escape. The chairs and tables around him, whichever one is caught, it will be thrown out and the target will be smashed to death. Ordinary people were as fragile as toys in front of him. At this moment, a round ball of meat rushed towards Li Anping. Boy, who do you want to kill? It was Lu Haoshan. He held his head with both hands and shot towards Li Anping like a bomb. Li Anping also roared angrily and punched Lu Haoshan. Amidst the loud noise, Lu Haoshan took a few steps back, but Li Anping flew out all of a sudden. With another loud noise, he crashed into the wall and was buried by a large piece of sand and gravel. Li Anping's brain was groggy, and only Hei's voice kept ringing, giving him a headache. The ability user. It's the ability user. Eat him. Eat him quickly. Eat him and we will become stronger. Shut up. But before Li Anping could react, Lu Haoshan had already rushed in front of him, grabbed his neck, and swung him over his head. With a bang, his body was hit into the wall of the roof again. The pain swept over like a tide. After 2 consecutive collisions, at least all his bones were broken, and there was heavy bleeding in his internal organs and concussion. Hei on the side shouted, "Be careful, he can convert all the fat in his body between muscle and fat, don't compete with him in strength." You reminded me too late. After speaking, Li Anping moved his body, left the wall, and flashed to the ground. After a loud bang, Lu Haoshan was slowly retracting his fist and fell down in his original position. There was only a huge pit left there. "You fat pig, you hit me so hard that it hurts." Li Anping touched his chest and spat out another mouthful of blood. From the outside, he looked extremely miserable, with all kinds of abrasions, scratches, and several bleeding wounds. White bones were also rolled out, mixed with the blood and flesh that had splashed on his body before, and he looked half dead. The people who were running away saw Li Anping being beaten like this by Lu Haoshan with 2 punches, and they all stopped to cheer, thinking that the situation was under control. Someone shouted, "Kill him quickly. This guy actually started a fight at the auction house. Young Master Lu, don't kill him, leave him here, we'll kill him." Someone else started to get angry, "I'm really scared. Who sent him? We must investigate thoroughly and all the relevant personnel must be held accountable." Li Anping and Lu Haoshan in the field ignored them. Lu Haoshan's eyes were red, staring at Li Anping, panting, "Trash, you actually dared to call me a fat pig? I'm going to kill you." After saying that, he tightened his body, and his fat had turned into muscle, rushing towards Li Anping with an unparalleled thrust. As Lu Haoshan ran, the whole hall trembled, and a huge wind was driven by Lu Haoshan's body, blowing Li Anping's hair away. Looking at Lu Haoshan rushing over, Li Anping endured the pain in his body and rushed to the side. He dodged Lu Haoshan's attack, but the opponent did not let him go. He turned slightly and attacked him again, but Li Anping rolled away and dodged. But Lu Haoshan's brain seemed to be not working well, and he was determined to hit Li Anping to death. So he tried to hit Li Anping again, but Li Anping easily dodged all of them. Seeing Li Anping getting more and more relaxed and faster, the angry expressions of the guests on the side gradually disappeared, and some people were even more frightened. What's going on? How did his injury get better again? Super fast regeneration, he has the ability to regenerate super fast. While shouting, several people ran towards the elevator, but before they took a few steps, they were hit on the head by a whistling chair and fell to the ground. Then their feet twitched slightly a few times and they stopped moving. Li Anping's devilish voice sounded, "Whoever runs away first, I will kill first." Amazing murderous auras swept over, as if someone was blowing cold air behind my neck. Cold sweat kept coming out, and all those who wanted to escape stopped. That was the murderous aura generated in Li Anping's body after he killed hundreds of people. No one thought that when Li Anping was fighting with Lu Haoshan, he was still at ease and observed the situation of the other people in the hall. This time Lu Haoshan was even more angry and screamed. He was steaming all over his body, roared, and his body swelled again, and rushed towards Li Anping fiercely. Too many flaws. At this time, Li Anping, who had recovered from his injuries, had already decided to end the battle. Lu Haoshan had too many flaws. If he hadn't been unclear about the opponent's ability at the beginning, he and Lu Haoshan would not even be injured if they fought with strength. He looked at Lu Haoshan, who was rushing towards him expressionlessly, and with a wrong step, he dodged the opponent's impact and appeared at the opponent's side. Then he shouted softly, and the explosive state was activated. His body suddenly grew to more than 2 meters. With his greatly increased strength, he punched Lu Haoshan's empty back. Boom! With the impact force and Li Anping's full strength punch, Lu Haoshan couldn't stop at all, and he crashed into the wall like a meteor. This is underground, and the walls around are all solid. Lu Haoshan's collision directly created a big pit. In the dust, he fell to the ground with a bloody head, and his mind was in chaos. Although your strength is great, it is all temporarily converted from fat, and the control is seriously insufficient. In other words, you can't control this temporary increase in strength at all. Turning is already difficult, let alone stopping. Li Anping walked towards Lu Haoshan, who was lying on the ground, and said in his heart, "Why did I feel that there was a force blocking the attack for him when I hit his back just now, and the first time he attacked me, the strength he exerted was also more than I expected." However, Li Anping thought about it and felt that it might be the energy and strength unique to the other party's ability, just like his own soul power. So he walked up to Lu Haoshan, and squatted down as he looked at him lying on the ground with trembling eyes, still struggling to get up. "When I saw you just now, I wanted to kill you. Because you really disgust me." Li Anping clenched his fist and said to Lu Haoshan, "Goodbye, you fat pig. I accept your power." Bang! Boom! Boom! Li Anping punched Lu Haoshan's head 3 times in a row. After 3 punches, Lu Haoshan was knocked down again. However, Li Anping felt the feeling of being hit by the power again. This time it was particularly obvious. Originally, the opponent should have died after these 3 punches. As a result, although Lu Haoshan's breath became weaker, he was still alive. What kind of energy is this? It's very resistant. Li Anping snorted coldly and punched a few more times. Continuous roars sounded. Everyone in the hall looked at Li Anping with fear as he punched Lu Haoshan's head one by one, making a loud noise like a pile driver. Finally, there was a crisp sound. He was still slightly moving, but he was no longer breathless. His entire head was completely deformed and twisted. Even if his mother was here, he would not be recognized. Shaking his hands, the white and red liquid on his arms fell to the ground. Li Anping, who had absorbed Lu Haoshan's soul, felt waves of powerful forces being focused into his body. His body, which had not grown for a long time, was growing again in an incredible direction. He laughed and said, "Ha ha ha ha, strength 3.4, speed 2.2, physical fitness 4.1, Li Anping, this pig is so delicious to eat." In silence, the people on the side looked at Li Anping in disbelief, who looked relaxed, as if they didn't believe that Lu Haoshan was killed by the other party. But a few seconds later, the crowd went crazy. They screamed, suffered, and looked hysterical, and seemed to be more terrified than when Li Anping just started killing. Asshole, do you know what you did? You killed Lu Jun's son, the only son of the leader of Zhongai Hall. Damn it! Damn it! Damn it! Now we are all going to die. You made us all die together. Lu Jun likes to vent his anger the most. He won't even let our family go. No, I don't want to fall into Lu Jun's hands, you bastard, I will fight you. After saying that, a middle-aged man suddenly raised his pistol and rushed towards Li Anping. Li Anping just glanced at him, flashed to his side, and broke his neck. The headless body of the middle-aged man continued to run 4 or 5 steps before falling to the ground with blood spurting out. At this time, everyone seemed to realize that compared to Lu Jun, Li Anping in front of them seemed to control their lives. But Li Anping ignored them. He just rushed into the crowd again, punching and kicking, killing 2 more people. Among the remaining people, some gave up resistance, and some fainted on the ground, but no matter which one, Li Anping punched him directly. Until the last man was left, the man held his head with his hands, tears gushed out, and looked at Li Anping with a face full of collapse. He, dead, all dead, you will die too, Zhongai Hall will not let you go, and the lone wolf people will not let you go. You will die 1,000 times more miserably than us. Don't worry, I will send them all to hell to accompany you. After saying that, Li Anping directly punched the man's head. You two come out, I will clean up other places first, you wait here. Li Anping said to the 2 twin beautiful dogs of Lu Haoshan. Looking at the 2 girls trembling and unable to move, he shook his head and walked towards the stage. You wait for me here, I will kill the rest of the people, and then I will come to you.